Argentina, but I was visiting China too, and some other countries. So we can start this. I will go really quickly. So when, excuse me, when you are talking about alfalfa breeding, most of the breeding objectives are listed here, probably being forage yield the most important one. And then we have some other breeding objectives like tolerance to abiotic stresses, drought, flooding, cold, heat, etc. Forage quality, herbicide tolerance, lower growth potential. It's important for countries like Argentina and others in which grazing is a very important way in which alfalfa is used. Pest resistance, of course, insects and diseases, grazing tolerance in some other countries, and some other objectives. The next one, please. When we talk about forage yield, and this is information that I took from Dr. Dennis Hancock, the U.S. Dairy Research Center in Madison, Wisconsin. You see that the forage yield increases in the U.S. went up a little bit through many years, but in the last 20 years, they are essentially plateaued. And the same thing happened in Argentina. We have a very huge increase in forage yield during from up to the I should say in between 1970 and 1995. But then in the last 20 years or so, the years are almost the same. And the conclusion is these increases that we have seen before and in Argentina between the 70s and the late 90s was due primarily not as an increase in yield per se, but mostly because of the use of lower dormancy varieties, less dormant varieties, and the resistance to insect diseases. The next one. Some of the explanations that are being discussed because of this lack of yield increase in the last year are primarily due to the autotetraploidy inheritance, in which alfalfa is very sensitive to inbreeding. It has a very profound inbreeding preparation if you sell. So that makes almost impossible to make real hybrids through the development of inbred lines. And then another thing is, when you are talking about harvesting alfalfa, you are talking about harvesting the whole biomass, aerial biomass, rather than in the case of grains, you are just picking the grains, so you can select for a partition this relationship, source and destiny. But in this case, it's different because we are talking about to increase the whole plant, which is fairly important, difficult. And another factor that is explaining this very slow progress in yield is of the perennial nature of this crop, so in which persistence is an important trait, and for evaluating that you need many years of evaluation. The next one, please. So there have been some proposals to change that, like the formation of semi-hybrids, the improvement of two different populations, heterotic populations, and then you combine them into one heterotic population. This has been proposed by Charlie Brummer many years ago. There is another one using the semi-hybrid, using male sterility. You have a clone A, you cross it by clone B, one is male sterile. So this F1 product, you cross it with a third clone C, but you collect in bulk. That's why we call them semi-hybrid. But this is the system that you see in some commercial varieties like Hybrid Force series. they are not real hybrid, but there is a contribution, but a tiny contribution in my view. The new hope now is on genomic selection rather than the classic phenotypic selection. The next one. And there is a project in the University of Florida, US, conducted by Dr. Esteban Rios, which is, the next one please, Selma, which is combining this classical method of the training population. You are defining and identify the markers, and you apply this to this selection population in order to identify the real breeding value of each parent that you are picking for the next variety. Go ahead, please. And this is being applied for the improvement of alfalfa and annual ripe ryegrass. Of course, the next one. You have to identify the markers here that are informative enough to define the real breeding value. They use two different platforms here. You see the number of these markers that were used, and in the next one, they are in the next step of trying to determine the minimum number of harvests that you need in order to select for those best parents to conform the population, going through this genotyping and phenotyping stuff. The next one, please. Well, we can escape this one. Go ahead. It doesn't make it. But genetics, this genomic selection is also being applied not only for increasing yield, but also for increasing tolerance to abiotic stresses. We are part of a project that is conducted in Italy with the intervention of some of the northern African countries, in which we use 127 genotypes from a Mediterranean reference population, genotyped by GIS, and phenotyped is in multi-year biomass yield determinations. The results so far are concluding that the genotype by environment interaction is very important, which is supporting the necessity of select for a specific environment rather than having one population that is fit on all environments. This is something that is quite obvious sometimes, but you need to prove it. And so far, this is to me the weakest point. The prediction ability is reasonable, but it's not high enough to make a great progress on the thing. It's just 0.2. We need something bigger than that. The next one, please. So as far as abiotic stresses is concerned, we have here listed some of the most important ones: salinity, drought, flooding, heat, and cold. By selecting this, and this is I think one of the key points for Pakistan, to select for this adaptation to abiotic stresses allows us both things, or to have higher yields in less favorable regions, or to incorporate new regions for cropping alfalfa. The next one, please. So I will explain a little bit some of the things that we have done here in Argentina. As far as salinity tolerance is concerned, we conducted a selection process. I think there are more pictures here. Okay. So we planted on a very saline environment. You can see here the electrical conductivities are going from 12 to almost 33 decisiemens, which is very salty soil. We planted the alfalfa population to select, and by selecting not only those plants that were able to germinate under those conditions, but also to grow and produce some dry matter, we conducted three selections of phenotypic recurrent selection, and we developed several experimental populations, and they were extensively tested in the salt salinity lab in Riverside, in California. And one of these experimental populations identified by CISA-14 was doing very well under the experimental conditions. We tested 4 different salt concentrations in the irrigation water, and both resulfates and chloride. And this population, CISA-14, was released a couple of years ago in Argentina as the new cultivar called Cumen Palo Verde Inca, which is tolerant to salt. But let me tell you something. When we are talking about salt tolerance, we have to keep in mind that we are not changing the nature of this species. So we are able to generate a population, or in this case a cultivar, that is able to produce a little bit more under those conditions, but we are not talking about a complete gain of yield under those conditions. This is just something more, but it's not solving the whole thing. The next one, please. Well, cold resistance, this is something that is necessary in some areas like the northern China or US or Canada. And I will commend this selection process conducted by Dr. Wan in the Beijing University. She was working, go ahead please. Do you have the next one? Oh, okay. In northern China, this is a harsh environment, dry and very cold. So they were selecting the next one, please. They were selecting plants that were able to grow under those conditions, very cold, using medical, Medicao falcata and Medicao varia, which are those taxa related to really cold resistance. You see this sort of creeping root and branching roots, and they were selecting the plants that were able to survive under these conditions. The next one, and they started with a population of 1,890 plants, and they selected only 48. So it was a very high selection pressure, that's 2.5%. But they were phenotypically selecting those plants, and they were able to combine them and to release this cultivar Beijing 201 in China, which is very cold resistant. The next one, please. As far as drought is concerned, we have done some selection process in Argentina in cooperation with Italy, with the research center in Lodi, close to Milano, Dr. Paolo Anichiarico. And we performed 2 cycles of selection, phenotypic selection in Argentina with in a arid environment in northwestern part of the country, in the province of Santiago de Compostela, in which the deficit, the moisture deficit is almost permanent, and we selected plants that were able to survive there, 2 cycles, and then also we combined them with a genomic selection done by Italy in the previous slide that I showed before. And then in this last April, we established, the next one please, a trial that's, in which these populations are evaluated under field conditions. We have great hope that we are increasing the drought tolerance to a great extent in the near future. The next one, please. We also have a selection program for flooding, waterlogging, in fact, under experimental conditions in which we simulate an INTA, this is in the experiment station of Rafaela in the northeastern part of Argentina, and we create this type of environment here in which we put plants and in a solution, and we add agar-agar to impede. Agar impedes convective movements in the solution and increases ethylene levels in the root zone, just as the condition that you have when you have flooding. And by doing this, the next one please, we perform 2 cycles of selection and we increase the dry matter production of those plants under these flooding conditions, experimental conditions. The next step is to test them under field conditions, which is also a critical point. The next one, please. By using also this high number of secondary root or branch type root, you can also provide some tolerance to some insects. Like in Argentina, we have this problem with root curculius. So if you have the typical taproot and you have this kind of damage, holes and galleries and so on, the plant is really weak in order to take up water. But if you have this high number of secondary roots, even though you can have damage on some of them, the other one could be okay, and therefore the plant can tolerate this insect damage. The next one, please. Like I said before, for those countries in which grazing is important, to have good levels of drought tolerance could be important, or it is important in fact. So we perform 2 cycles of phenotypic recurrent selection for lower dry matter disappearance using in this case this near infrared technology on a population that we have developed several years ago using fistellated animals. So after these 2 cycles of selection, this experimental population was tested using sheep, and by using this bloat scaling, which 0 is no bloat, and this is number 4, very serious bloat, and the results indicates that we were able to diminish the incidence of bloat by this population by about 20–25%, which is important for us. So we released this experimental population as Malten Palo Verde Inta just last year, and will be in the market probably in 3 or 4 years, taking into account the time that we need for CDBs. The next one, please. In terms of forage quality, how can we improve forage quality? Well, there are several approaches. The one that we took, the one that we took is in a very non-normal population. We are talking about for dormancy 10. We were performing 4 cycles of phenotypic recurrent selection for the multi-leaf expression. This is the normal alfalfa leaf. But if you look at carefully, you will find plants with 4, 5, and up to 10 we found. By selecting for these high numbers of leaflets, we were able to, after, like I said, 4 cycles of phenotypic recurrent selection, going from 6.7 up to almost 78%. This is the cycle 4. And then we did, please, the next one, extensive testing under field conditions, with irrigation, with rainfall conditions, and so on and so forth. And you see the result here. This cycle 4 has a significant increase in leaf and stem ratio and a significant increase in crude protein. So this is a way of improving quality. However, this has a cost. The cost is we have shorter plants, even though these are not significant difference from the biological viewpoint. It's, in my opinion, is important. So we are having shorter plants with more leaves. So if you are talking about dry matter yield, we are losing a little bit of it. But if we are talking about quality per unit area, we are having a great increase. So this is one thing that we can try. But there are another approaches that were taken by some other programs. The next one, please, for improving quality. One is a US company, Alpharex, that way they released this high gest technology by phenotypically selecting for higher stem, leaf and stem ratio. And according to them, they were able to lower the lignin content by about 10 to 10%. This is one way of doing so. There is another way, using molecular tools like Forest Genetics International. They developed the hard extract technology, which is having low lignin content by using molecular tools, by knocking down some of the genes that are involved in the lignin synthesis. And they combine this with the random ready trait. And in Argentina, in 2019, 2 cultivars were deregulated and are being commercialized now, that having stuck these 2 traits, the harvester, which is low lignin, and the random. The next one, please, Mark. Another way of increasing quality that has been done in US and in China is delayed flowering. So by keeping the plant green and on the vegetative state, you can increase the quality and the yield. This has been patented by the Nobel Institute research, and this technology was in fact developed by 2 Chinese scientists. Simultaneously, in Argentina, the next one, some group of INTA did the same thing by using gene editing, using this CRISPR-Cas technology, and they were able to delay flowering too. So this is something that is, in Argentina, is under the experimental phase yet, and probably will be not deregulated, but is in the process of getting the approved for commercialization. That's an important thing, a difference. In Argentina, the products obtained by gene editing are not considered transgenic. Therefore, the deregulation is not necessary, and in order to register a cultivar by using gene editing, it's much easier and much faster and much cheaper than this transgenic approach. The next one, I think that we are approaching the end. If you are tired, I apologize, but I am trying to go fast. And herbicide tolerance is also a very important trait. They have been solved this by using transgenesis. Once again, Forest Genetics developed this random ready technology several years ago. And then we also have in Argentina, the next one please, a group that has developed tolerance to glufosinate, an herbicide known as Liberty. And this is in the deregulation process now. And I don't know if I have some more, I think. Well, yeah. And finally, there are some other objectives that are important in some other parts, like for instance, for us in Argentina, the tolerance to an Asian virus complex, which is a disease caused by 7 different viruses acting together. It's important. We are phenotypically selecting resistant plants under fecal conditions. There is another approach in China. There is a scientist who is working on trying to develop varieties that produce no hard seed. That could be important for the seed industry. I am not completely sure about the importance of this trait, but it's there. Like I said before, for some other countries, like for instance, US and New Zealand, Australia also, they are looking for grazing, they are trying to increase the use of alfalfa under grazing conditions, and therefore they are trying to select it for grazing tolerance. They develop selection protocols for this grazing tolerance. And then in the last World Alfalfa Congress held in San Diego in November 2022, Dr. Hancock again was listed some of the traits that in his view could be important for US to develop in alfalfa, like higher seed and vigor, and this is what also some of the topics that Dan was covering before, in order to get faster and better emergence and establishment of the crop. He also pointed out that are necessary higher level of pest resistance in diseases and insects. Probably tolerance to machinery traffic. It's important, particularly if you are thinking about introducing hay or silage. And another thing that could be important is compatibility with companion crops, particularly corn and probably some other grasses, in order to select for those alfalfa plants that are able to compete and to live together with some other crops, which is also important in the view of sustainability and increasing the biodiversity. That could be something that we have to take into account. And of course, the tolerance to extreme environmental conditions, which is in line with this abiotic stress tolerance. And I think this is it. Yes. So, in summary, I was making some notes. This is just an overview of some of the breeding programs in some countries. But going back and making a summary for Pakistan, I think and I suggest, in terms of breeding, of course, we have to select for adaptation, pest resistant, and abiotic stresses, and I think it's going to be important to increase the germplasm availability in order to increase the genetic base, because as we all know, selection is synonymous of having variability, so we need that. Another important thing that I believe could be critical for Pakistan is to establish an cultivar evaluation network using the same protocols, and so the results can be comparable, and therefore you can identify the best varieties for every specific environment that alfalfa is intended to be grown. Going back to the product of the breeding programs, the importance of selecting or developing locally adapted variety is you have also to provide or to create or to establish a very vigorous seed industry locally in Pakistan with a seed certification program, and particularly in this seed increase system, you have to reinforce probably in many things, but particularly in weed control, because we have seen many problems with other presence and some other weeds. So that development of local industrial seed industry in Pakistan will be important not only for saving money from imports of seed, but particularly because you are promoting locally adapted varieties, which is going to have higher yields. And I think one of other myths that you have, or think would be important is to work on extension activities in order to convince the farmers why to grow alfalfa. Because I've been told many times that for many people, the idea is alfalfa is just for horses and not for cattle. So this is important that you have to promote many different things, how to grow alfalfa, take into account all the critical points that Dan was mentioning, establishment and so on, but particularly to convince the farmers what are the benefits of having alfalfa. And lately, I think by in doing so, if you can have agreements, collaboration agreements with different countries, within the country with different provinces and universities and so on, which is, I believe this is happening now. But also to reinforce agreements, international agreements, not only with UC Davis, but with some other institutions could be important. Thank you very much. Shukriya.